In an international secret meeting in Moscow, a shocking exchange took place between two powerful figures. Just moments ago, Vladimir Putin's words sent British monarch Charles II into a spiral of doubt, leaving him teetering on the brink of retracting his statements. Witnesses described how the British king's voice faltered, and his eyes welled up. What transpired behind the closed doors of the Kremlin? As we delve into this captivating tale, prepare to be astounded by the truths concealed from us for so long. Few were aware of the meeting that took place on September 20th in Moscow, save for faint whispers echoing through the halls of diplomatic buildings. There were no official communications or photographs splashed across the news. Even the press, typically in pursuit of leads, remained silent. Only a handful of Kremlin officials knew that in a room, unnoticed by even television cameras, two formidable men were set to confront each other at a heavy table. One was irrevocably linked to the British crown for decades, the other held the reins of a powerful nation's policy. Putin arrived first, moving with an aura that bent the very space around him. His dark blue suit, impeccably tailored, and his deep crimson tie spoke of understated authority. His calm, slightly fatigued demeanor concealed a razor-sharp attentiveness in his eyes. This was the gaze of a man who absorbed every detail. Minutes later, the doors opened again to reveal Charles. His entrance was both theatrical and ceremonial, tall, somewhat hunched, yet maintaining a posture as if centuries of tradition were behind him. Clad in a deep navy three-piece suit, the glint of his pocket watch caught the light momentarily. Yet, his face betrayed an inner tension, furrows deepened near his mouth while his eyes scanned the room, seeking the assurance that this moment couldn't provide. The silence in the room was palpable as they faced each other. An oak table stretched the length of the hall, adorned with vintage maps and portraits of Russian generals. Two carafes filled with water and fine crystal glasses stood coolly in the corner. There was no reprieve in the form of coffee or wine, only the stark clarity of cold water. Each word in this setting felt magnified, resonating louder than any rally or press conference. Charles spoke first, lifting his chin slightly as if to summon royal dignity. Vladimir, Europe stands on the cusp of decisive action. You have but one option remaining. He paused, his palm sliding across the chair to emphasize the weight of his words. Britain and its allies are prepared to offer Russia a path to reconciliation, but the cost is clear. Your northern resources, the very ones that provide you strength and leverage, must be handed over to international governance. Europe will gain the resources, while you will gain the favor. His statement was firm, yet a thread of uncertainty wove through his tone, as if he doubted the power of his own argument. Putin's expression remained immutable, leaning forward slightly, fingers locked in contemplation. His reply came with a tranquil, rehearsed precision. An intriguing proposition. There was neither assent nor denial in his tone. Merely a statement that, while factual, felt more dangerous than any sharp retort. Sensing the weight of the moment, Charles pressed on. Russia must return to Europe. Not to Asia or the shadow of China, but to where its culture and history reside, in Britain, France, Germany. We are ready to assist, but it requires recognition that integration with Europe is the sole path forward. He emphasized the urgency in his final words, constructing a definitive closure to his argument. Britain played a decisive role in the defeat of fascism, he continued. The very fact that the Soviet Union managed to repel the Germans was due to our efforts. A moment of silence hung in the air. Putin's brow arched slightly, his gaze sharpened. He reached for a folder resting at the edge of the table, slowly flipping through its pages. 27 million victims, he said quietly. Over 300 divisions at just the Eastern Front. The 41 campaign halted at Moscow. The 42 was Stalingrad, 500,000 prisoners. In 43, the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history. His voice held steady, with every statistic hitting his counterpart like a hammer. This was no debate, it was an unfolding indictment born from statistics. Charles attempted to interject, his lips quivering. Perhaps you are right. His voice faltered, gaze dropping to the polished surface of the table, revealing a weariness along with a hint of vulnerability. Without the Soviet Union, Europe would not have stood, he breathed out. This admission sounded both like a confession and resignation. Once again, silence enveloped the room, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of a clock, as if it were a reminder that history is unforgiving. After a heavy pause, Putin closed the folder and slid it aside, marking what felt like an end to this phase. Charles looked up, his expression revealing a hint of embarrassment. As they prepared to leave the main hall, each man was absorbed in his thoughts. Charles's mind flickered with the discussions on Stalingrad, the pages of forgotten history. Meanwhile, Putin exuded a calmness, as if he had merely added a subtle brushstroke to an already painted picture. In a clandestine meeting within the shadowy Kremlin walls, two powerful figures faced off, Vladimir Putin and Charles, the British monarch. Tensions were palpable as not a word leaked from this gathering, shrouded in silence yet aching with gravity. The air crackled with unspoken stakes, as if the very essence of European geopolitics hung in the balance. What shocking truths did this closed-door encounter conceal? As Charles entered, the hall felt both theatrical and solemn. Tall and slightly stooped, his bearing held the weight of centuries past. Clad in a deep sea blue suit, the glimmer of his pocket watch caught the light, a fleeting reminder of time's relentless march. There was an unmistakable tension etched into the lines around his mouth, his eyes scanning the room for solace that this meeting did not provide. The quiet surrounding them intensified, every heartbeat echoing like a drum in the grand oak chamber. A massive oak table stretched across the expanse of the room, adorned with ancient maps and portraits of military commanders past. In one corner, two decanters stood sentinel, filled with water and crystalline glasses, no coffee or wine to soften the moment, just the stark simplicity of coldness and clarity. Within this environment, every utterance would resonate more significantly than words ever did at press conferences. Charles gathered himself, lifting his chin as if to assert royal dignity, and began, "Vladimir, Europe stands on the brink of decisive action. You have but one opportunity." His palm grazed the table, imparting weight to his words. Britain and its allies are willing to offer Russia a path to reconciliation, but the price is clear. Your northern resources, the very leverage you hold, must be placed under international oversight. Europe will receive the resources, and you will gain leniency. Kazakhstan took this path, turning a blind eye to much. His voice carried strength, but with a thread of doubt woven through, as if he questioned his own persuasiveness. Putin remained stoic, a flicker of curiosity crossing his features. Leaning slightly forward, his fingers intertwined, he calmly replied, "Interesting proposition." It was neither an agreement nor a refusal, a mere observation, yet each word felt laced with imminent threat. Charles sensed the need to intensify his argument, pressing forward, Russia must return to Europe. Not to Asia, not to be overshadowed by China, but to where its culture and history have always belonged, Britain, France, Germany. We stand ready to assist. Acknowledgement is essential, integration with Europe is the only pathway. He pressed ahead, punctuating his speech with an overt assurance, Britain played a pivotal role in the victory over fascism. Even the fact that the Soviet Union repelled the Germans owes us. Silence enveloped the room again as Putin raised an eyebrow, sharpening his gaze. Slowly, he reached for the folder lying at the edge of the table, turning the pages with deliberation before speaking quietly. 27 million victims, what would Putin reveal next that would counter Charles's confident claims? Summary of the previous part. The conversation had escalated as Charles emphasized Britain's pivotal role in defeating fascism, suggesting that even the Soviet Union owed much to their efforts. Vladimir's response was chilling, unveiling sobering statistics about the immense sacrifices made, rendering Charles momentarily speechless. As the silence settled in the room, it became evident that their historical perspectives were clashing. Charles, flustered, sought to broaden the discussion while Putin maintained an imposing coolness. In the cold atmosphere of the Kremlin, two leaders faced each other, their legacies at stake. Charles spoke with fervor, Britain played an essential role in overcoming fascism. Even the Soviet Union's victories relied on our contributions. His voice echoed in the stillness, but Putin's eyes narrowed, calculating. He reached for a file, the sound of paper rustling emphasized the gravity of the moment. 27 million lives lost, he stated steadily, leaving a silence that weighed heavily. Over 300 divisions on the Eastern Front. Each statistic was a hammer, striking hard against Charles's confidence. The push at Moscow, Putin continued, the encirclement at Stalingrad, 500,000 prisoners. And at Kursk, the largest tank battle in history. This was no dispute, it was an unsettling revelation of historical accountability. Charles felt the pressure building, his lips trembled as he sought a rebuttal, the words faltering. Perhaps you're right, he finally conceded, his gaze dropping to the polished table. The tension hung thick between them. And Charles acknowledged the uncomfortable truth of history. Without the Soviet Union, Europe would not have survived, he admitted, his voice layered with defeat. As the timepiece ticked monotonously, a reminder that history is unforgiving, Putin closed the folder with deliberate care, signifying the end of that chapter. The king lifted his gaze, his expression betraying confusion. For once, his assertions seemed fragile, as if they were crumbling under scrutiny like an old building. Maybe I should see it from a broader perspective, Charles murmured, justifying his wavering stance. He mentioned countless books and libraries that chronicled diverse histories, each nation interpreting events through its own lens. A slight smirk crossed Putin's face as he gestured to continue their discussion in another room. They moved through the Kremlin's corridors, past battle-scene murals that vividly captured the weight of their nation's pasts. Each step echoed under grand arches, the quiet enveloped them like a shroud. What secrets did these walls conceal? As they entered a smaller chamber, the atmosphere shifted again, books from the British Library neatly lined the oak shelves, each cover a gateway to another narrative. Putin's fingers skimmed over the spines, revealing volumes that told tales of struggle and triumph. He opened one at random. It states, he said, that the opening of the Second Front in 1944 was decisive. But where is Stalingrad in this narrative? The implications of his inquiry hung in the air, a cloud of challenge and curiosity. Our students know that it was there the backbone of the German army broke. Do yours? Charles took a step back, hesitating. He pulled another book from the shelf, anxiously flipping through pages filled with British military successes. Yet, mentions of the fierce battle at the Volga were only scant lines. Could they have overlooked such a pivotal moment? We might have glossed over it, he admitted, the weight of realization pressing down on him. In our narratives, we tend to focus elsewhere. Elsewhere, Putin echoed, his tone a gentle reproach. For us, this isn't merely a side note. This is the blood and memory of millions. The air was thick with the shared understanding of their divergent histories. As silence settled in the room once more, Charles stared at the open pages, his face revealing the strain of a monarch confronted with uncomfortable truths. But a flicker of respect seemed to pass between them as Putin closed the book gently, emphasizing, history cannot be rewritten. It can only be preserved. Charles nodded subtly, suggesting a crack in his fortress of conviction. With their worlds colliding in unexpected ways, both leaders walked back toward the main hall, each enveloped in thoughts of their nation's narratives, and the price of recognition. But as they settled again at the oak table, an unsteady tension remained. Could such divergent views ever truly reconcile? Would this moment shift the tide of their shared history? At a pivotal moment in a secluded Kremlin meeting, two powerful leaders are faced with a clash of perspectives that shakes the very foundations of their nations. Summary of the last part. After a long, tense discussion about historical memory and respect, Charles reluctantly began to address Britain's contributions, acknowledging a deeper truth about perceptions of colonialism. In a moment alive with electric tension, Charles leaned forward, his voice imbued with an unexpected warmth. Vladimir, Britain has gifted the world civilization. Roads, cities, universities, all stem from our legacy. Our colonies received laws, education, isn't that significant? A faint smile flirted with the corners of Putin's lips, yet his demeanor remained calm, almost soothing. But remember, the Soviet Union assisted in liberating those very colonies, India, Africa, Cuba, he replied, each name pronounced with a weight that resonated. We armed freedom fighters, provided engineers and doctors. We stood with those yearning for liberation. As the last word echoed, the temperature in the room shifted. Charles grew quieter, his fingers grazing the surface of the book without turning a page. A palpable heaviness rested upon him, like an empire's weight settling over his shoulders. Finally, he admitted, our textbooks seldom tell that story. We portrayed ourselves more as civilization's givers rather than rulers. His confession hung in the air with a rare honesty that broke through the regal facade. With that, an uncharacteristic vulnerability slipped from Charles's mask, allowing his true self to emerge. Putin nodded appreciatively, his gaze softened, bridging a moment where two vastly different worlds seemed to touch. As they walked back into the main hall, the atmosphere shifted. Each man was ensnared in his thoughts, the silence thick with unspoken understanding. Charles's eyes wandered over the ornate carpets and soaring ceilings, replaying the dialogue about Stalingrad, a piece of history he could no longer overlook. In contrast, Putin exuded calm, seemingly finalizing a chapter he had long prepared. Seated once again at the oak table, Charles decided it was time to redirect the conversation. His tone shifted, becoming imbued with pride and warmth. You see, Vladimir, Britain possesses something that binds us through centuries, our dynasties, our aristocracy, and court traditions. It's more than lavish rituals, it embodies continuity, shaping our national character. He spoke passionately, his words blooming into something genuine and alive, revealing parts of himself once hidden, as he reached across the table to connect. In a historic exchange behind closed doors in Moscow, a remarkable meeting unfolded between two powerful leaders, Vladimir Putin and Charles, heir to the British throne. It was a conversation that could change the fabric of history, highlighting the stark contrasts between their nations and the weight of the past. Charles leaned back, running his hand across his face, and for a moment, he closed his eyes, perhaps in reflection. The glow of regal portraits surrounding them juxtaposed starkly with a photo of Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, beaming widely. Your symbols reflect a leap into the future, he acknowledged quietly, while ours seem stuck in the past. These words felt more like a revelation than a defeat, a realization he had reached on his own. Putin regarded him with calmness, showing no sign of triumph. To him, there was no need for grand victories, history itself was rendering its judgments. They both fell silent for a few moments, bathing in a tranquil space that was far from hostile, seeming instead to invite introspection. It was as if the very walls of the Kremlin absorbed their conversation, preserving each phrase within its stone embrace. Eventually, Charles rose, his regal posture softened by vulnerability in his expression. You speak in such a way that makes a man feel like a student, he remarked softly. I came here to persuade you, but I leave having learned so much myself. Putin rose as well, extending his hand. Charles grasped it firmly, surprised by its strength. We are on our own path, Putin stated, but if Europe wishes to walk alongside us, it must accept us as equals. Charles nodded, a glimmer of moisture appearing in his eyes, yet he held his gaze firm. I understand, he replied. History does not forgive those who think only of themselves. As they released their clasp, the tension in the room seemed to dissipate, leaving behind a serene atmosphere. Once the advisors left and the doors closed, an intimate silence enveloped the room, which felt overly spacious for just the two of them. Yet this very emptiness added depth to their discussion. Charles glided his palm over the wooden table, gathering his thoughts. Weariness adorned his face, a rarely seen expression in front of cameras. You know, Vladimir, he began quietly, I've often heard from my wife about your country. He paused, taking a breath. She always spoke fondly of Russia, recalling how she was taken aback by your sincerity and your ability to honor traditions. Putin raised an eyebrow slightly but chose to remain silent. Thus, against the backdrop of history, two leaders navigated the challenges of their nations, weaving through past grievances while contemplating the possibility of a cooperative future. What lay ahead in this intricate dance of diplomacy? Would mutual understanding and respect overshadow the shadows of history? In a tense and secretive meeting in Moscow, a monumental conversation unfolded between two powerful leaders. A shocking exchange revealed old wounds and new understandings, compelling reflections on the weight of history and the nature of identity. Stay with us, as we delve into the drama that almost shattered the veneer of diplomacy, stirring long-buried emotions and challenging entrenched beliefs. Just moments before, King Charles, with an unusual weariness rarely seen in photographs, shared words he'd often heard from his wife. "You know, Vladimir," he began softly, "I've heard her speak warmly of your country." He paused, recalling how she admired the Russians' authenticity and strong sense of tradition. Putin raised an eyebrow but remained silent. "Camilla often says that everything is different in Russia than in Europe," Charles continued. "People there know how to remember. Here, within our festivals and parades, memory often fades. But in Russia, it breathes life in every conversation." His tone was unexpectedly gentle, as if he, too, was taken aback by this admission. With a deep breath, he added, "Perhaps this is why your soldiers withstood trials that would have toppled others." Putin inclined his head slightly, his expression calm, yet his eyes sparkled with intensity. "Memory empowers a nation," he replied. "It connects generations. We honor not only victors, but also those who simply lived and labored." Charles nodded, his gaze shifting as if he were examining distant memories rather than the Kremlin's walls. "I often think we've hidden too much," he confessed. "Our books brim with tales of battles, kings, and admirals, yet they lack the narratives of ordinary people. We've made our citizens mere extras in a royal play." Putin allowed a faint smile to cross his lips, in stark contrast to the king's solemn reflection. "In our stories, every individual who contributed to the country becomes a hero. This is how Soviet citizens felt they wrote history together." His words hung in the air, weighing heavily on Charles's heart. He finally met Putin's gaze, serious and almost vulnerable. "I came here to discuss politics," he stated, "but it seems we're discussing something deeper: memory, dignity, the right of every soul to feel part of a nation." Putin paused. He sipped from his glass and, after a moment of contemplation, replied, "Politics may fade, but memory endures." The clock on the wall chimed softly, punctuating the silence around them. Time seemed to dissolve into the backdrop of a conversation that had shed its diplomatic masks. Charles rested his hands on his knees and murmured, "You speak in a manner that even a king feels like a student." A slight smile graced his lips, yet moisture glistened in his eyes, revealing the profound impact of their exchange. What happens when the dialogue shifts from politics to profound human truths? Can leaders forge a connection that transcends their roles? Time seemed to dissolve around them, becoming nothing more than a distant echo as the masks of diplomacy slipped away. Charles lowered his hands onto his knees and whispered, "You speak in a way that makes even a king feel like a student." A faint, almost fragile smile touched his lips. Yet behind it, his eyes shone with unbidden tears. Putin met his gaze calmly, without an iota of mockery. Instead, there was something deeper: understanding. "Memory," he seemed to say silently, "is the great equalizer, even for those accustomed to standing on different pedestals." Charles sat motionless, as if afraid to shatter the invisible thread that bound their conversation. His fingers toyed nervously with the edge of his handkerchief, yet he didn't dare lift it to his face. There was a betrayal in his shining eyes. "Tell me, Vladimir," Charles began softly, "what if Europe offered you an alliance? No conditions. No heavy demands. Would you accept it?" Putin looked him straight in the eye, voice steady and flat as the distant horizon. "An alliance can only happen when we are seen as equals. Not vassals or mere suppliers of raw materials, but as a people who have shaped history more than any other. If Europe wants unity, it must remember one thing clearly: we will never forget the sacrifices, nor the heroism." The simplicity of his words belied their silent force. Charles clenched his handkerchief tightly and bowed his head. "I understand," he admitted quietly. "But our elites, they are trapped in memories of colonies and empire's greatness. They struggle to accept that history has changed." Putin shrugged almost imperceptibly. History always changes. But it cannot be rewritten just to make it convenient. We know well, memory is a weapon mightier than any tank. And we guard it fiercely. Charles lifted his eyes again. His face softened, vulnerable, almost raw. Your strength is in your memory, he said. But ours has faded behind crowns and grand ceremonies. We hide our weaknesses beneath parades. A wry smile crept at the corner of Putin's mouth. People can sense a lie. Parades are beautiful. But when people feel their work is worthless, no music can save them. Those words struck deep into Charles's soul. He fell silent, closing his eyes for a moment. Images flashed behind his lids, parades in London, tourists thronging the palace gates, the glitter of uniforms. Yet beneath all that spectacle were tired faces of ordinary Britons, living lives far removed from these pompous displays. With a heavy breath, he spoke again. I came here thinking I'd convince you, but it seems I'm the one discovering something important. The atmosphere held a strange intensity as the two leaders sat across from each other, a quiet moment stretching between them. Suddenly, Charles glanced at a portrait of a Russian general, deeply pondering. Did Europe truly stand a chance of progressing without accepting Russia as a peer? He believed that Russia would inevitably follow its own path, regardless of outside opinions. Putin nodded silently, his demeanor shifting from that of a politician to a man whose calmness stemmed from a deep-rooted confidence in his nation. Charles then spoke softly, revealing a glimpse into a personal connection. Camilla always said you possess a special humanistic strength that we seem to have lost. Now, I'm starting to grasp what she meant. His voice cracked slightly, echoing the vulnerability in the room. The silence around them transformed, becoming a warm embrace rather than a heavy weight. This moment transcended political posturing, it turned into an impactful dialogue, one that could reshape the future. Putin broke the stillness, his voice steady, carrying a firm gravitas. Remember this, Charles. Russia charts its own course. We do not seek foreign thrones, we are building our own future. If Europe wishes to walk with us, it must come honestly, without deceit. The finality of his words hung in the air. Tears welled in Charles's eyes, which he didn't conceal. I hear you, he admitted. Perhaps this is the very lesson I came to learn. Yet, tension flickered underneath Charles's exterior confidence. A part of him resisted succumbing in this discussion, a historical pride clinging tightly to the legacy of Britain. He took a deep breath, his voice regaining its firmness. You know, Vladimir, there is indeed something we hold dear. The British Empire, despite its faults, brought civilization to the world. We built roads, established universities, and provided law and education in places that lived in chaos. It was more than a hunger for power. This was our contribution to humanity's advancement. His words resonated with a rehearsed fervor, each statement echoing past convictions. Putin absorbed his words, silently considering the weight of history as Charles's gaze sparkled with newfound determination. The stakes of their conversation grew higher, each statement dripping with legacy and the potential for change. But then came a pivotal moment, their eyes locked, and the tangible silence spoke volumes. How would their histories intertwine going forward? Would this exchange lead to understanding or deeper divides? Only time would unveil the answers, and the tension continued to loom in the air. In a dramatic encounter hidden behind the Kremlin's enigmatic walls, whispers of tension filled the air. Two monumental figures, Vladimir Putin and Charles, faced off in a dialogue that would reveal decades of unspoken truths. With emotions simmering just beneath the surface, their exchange would unearth the complex legacy of their nations. As they prepared to share this pivotal moment of history, an unsettling question loomed: what truths would emerge from their confrontation, and would they forever alter the narratives of power? The meeting commenced with an atmosphere heavy with anticipation. Putin arrived first, his presence commanding yet measured, dressed sharply in a dark blue suit. His eyes radiated an intensity that betrayed a deeper resolution. Shortly after, Charles entered, embodying the weight of centuries of tradition. Yet, his confidence wavered, hinting at inner turmoil as he contemplated the monumental stakes at hand. The vast oak table between them bore witness to the gravity of their discussion. Charles initiated the debate, his voice slightly trembling as he articulated Europe's urgent need for unity, disguised as a benevolent offer toward Russia. Yet, beneath the polished surface of diplomacy, anxiety seeped through as he made his case regarding resources and power dynamics. "You must relinquish your northern reserves," he insisted, though his conviction faltered. Putin's response was deliberate and calm, hinting at complexity without conceding. "Interesting proposal," he stated, his tone a neutral ledger on the scales of confrontation. Each word came with weight. Not just as a retort but as a quiet challenge. As Vladimir's brow arched, he leaned in, delivering a counter-narrative steeped in stark statistics that would pierce through the veneer of King Charles's arguments. 27 million lost, he echoed, referencing lives claimed during the harrowing history of conflict. Each number landed heavily, a reminder of the sacrifices woven into the Russian identity. Charles, momentarily speechless, bore the weight of these revelations. "Perhaps you are right," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, revealing an unexpected vulnerability. Silence enveloped them, the kind that speaks louder than any shout. It was a moment of reckoning. Yet, the tension shifted as the conversation evolved into a deeper exploration of narratives. Charles, inching closer to humility, referenced the silent histories in their textbooks, one empire's triumphs overshadowed by another's struggle. "History doesn't welcome silence," Putin remarked, emphasizing the necessity of acknowledging all voices. "True strength lies in embracing our past with honesty." Those words shattered the facade of pride that had long stood between them. Charles's eyes, once proud, now brimmed with understanding. "Perhaps that is indeed our weakness," he confessed, grappling with the disarray of his own nation's narrative. As they transitioned to a more intimate chamber filled with relics of their intertwined histories, the palpable tension transformed into an unexpected alliance. The silence thickened with a mix of respect and pain, hinting at a newfound acknowledgement of their shared humanity. "Let's explore the roots of these stories together," Charles suggested, extending an olive branch of curiosity. The air buzzed with the electric thrill of possibility, signs that a bridge might form where once stood only divides. In that moment, two worlds, separated by time and history, began to intertwine, seeking redemption in mutual understanding and a collective future. A brief recap, he did not press the issue. He sensed that the acknowledgement was already clear, so further debate was unnecessary. The chamber hushed, the ticking clock seemed to stretch. Charles leaned in and whispered, "Perhaps that is why you stay strong, memory and a drive forward." Now the tension deepened. The king's voice dropped to a quiet murmur, yet honesty rang through each syllable, rare for a man accustomed to public speeches. Charles sat motionless, his face worn, his hands resting on the table. His gaze drifted over the intricate carpet pattern, as if the woven threads might reveal answers he dared not ask aloud. "Vladimir," he began slowly, "my wife always spoke of Russia with warmth. He spoke of Camilla, who saw in you not just a nation but people possessing an uncanny resilience. She told me they can keep humanity alive, even amid hardship." The king's throat tightened. Putin inclined his head, listening without interruption. "Sometimes I think she understood more than I did," the monarch confessed. "We grew used to grand palaces, ornate ceremonies that substitute for real life. Yet life lies in memory, in respect for the past, and in honesty toward the future." A new softness flickered in his eyes, an unexpected gentleness for a British sovereign. "Perhaps," Charles said, "we have often looked down on you, expecting Russia to bend to our will instead of standing beside us." He added, "Now I see you will never let your history be humbled, and that is right." Putin answered with steady calm, his tone firm yet unharsh. "Russia walks its own path. We do not seek foreign approval. But if Europe wishes to join us, it must see us as equals, no conspiracies, no rewriting of history, no veiling truth behind parades. We remember, we guard our story honestly." The king's shoulders dropped, as if an invisible burden had lifted. "I hear you," he whispered. "What I must carry home is not a report, but understanding. Russia follows its own way. silence settled like thick incense, a sense of completion hanging in the air, as if the exchange had become a part of history itself rather than mere diplomacy. Putin's voice softened once more. We may differ, but memory is what makes us equal. A sudden rustle of papers broke the stillness. A hidden dossier slid across the polished oak, bearing a name no one expected. What secret lay within, and how would it reshape the fragile bridge between two ancient powers? In a secretive meeting not too long ago, something extraordinary transpired between two titans of history, Vladimir Putin and Charles, the British monarch. Witnesses claimed a rare moment unfolded when the British king struggled to maintain his composure, tears brimming in his eyes. What revelations were exchanged behind the fortified walls of the Kremlin? Stay tuned as we dive deep into this astonishing narrative that has been concealed for too long. Imagine a silent chamber within the Kremlin, where echoes of the past reverberate against grand oak tables adorned with the history of military triumphs. The air thick with tension as Putin, exuding an air of authority in his meticulously tailored dark suit, awaited his counterpart. Minutes later, Charles entered, a figure bound by centuries of royal legacy but visibly affected by the gravity of the occasion. With an almost ceremonial presence, he approached the moment as a king should, a regal chin held aloft, yet, an undercurrent of uncertainty stirred within him. Their conversations unfolded in a hushed, focused atmosphere, where every word held weight heavier than gold. Vladimir, Charles began, voice firm but trembling slightly, Europe stands at the brink of decisive action, offering you an olive branch for reconciliation, the price is known. He paused, gauging the room's atmosphere. Your resources are your power. Surrender them for international governance. A chilling silence enveloped them, amplifying the impact of his assertions. But when Putin responded, each phrase was articulated deliberately. A calm yet razor-sharp critique of the British perspective on history. Interesting proposition, he remarked coolly, dismissing the proposal while punctuating each point with historical context, statistics of sacrifices made in war. 27 million lives lost, and yet, where is the recognition of our struggle? Charles faltered, clenching his fists as if trying to hold on to the fading remnants of dominance. Perhaps you are correct, he finally murmured, acknowledging the painful truth about their shared past, a balance of power transformed by the weights of memory and loss. What was meant to be a straightforward negotiation morphed into an emotional confrontation driven by an acknowledgement of history's undeniable power. As the clock chimed softly, signaling the weight of time and remembrance, Charles found himself looking inward. Today, I've come to realize something profound, he whispered, as if the room itself held its breath. For a moment, the barriers erected by royalty seemed to dissolve. An unexpected recognition emerged, a dawning realization that power rests not just in crowns but in shared narratives, whispered on the lips of ordinary people. As they resumed their discussions, clarity did not escape them. They spoke of legacy not simply in terms of domination but in the intrinsic value of understanding, of memory intertwining their nation's fates. With each exchange, they conveyed a sentiment more potent than contracts, an alliance forged in the fires of history, illuminating paths toward a shared future. Would they choose to be heirs of their past or architects of a new legacy? The silence hung heavily, teetering on the brink of revelation, as both men contemplated this singular moment, one that could redefine the relationship between history and legacy, power and humanity. The sound of solemn chimes echoed through the grand hall as the clock struck 9, a striking conclusion, like the last notes of a powerful symphony. Charles took a deep breath and expressed, "Today, I've come to understand much." In that moment, he realized that understanding held more importance than any agreement on paper. Rising slowly, he exuded a sense of dignity, though the royal luster had dimmed. His posture now felt more human than kingly. Vladimir, too, stood tall, and they exchanged a handshake, firm yet equal, devoid of extravagant gestures. At that moment, the atmosphere shifted, the air lightened, the walls seemed to draw closer, and this meeting transcended mere diplomacy. For a few minutes, they remained silent, not wanting to disturb the fragile harmony that had developed after their lengthy discussion. In that instant, they were no longer a king and a president but two individuals, each carrying their own memories and the heavy burdens of history. Charles gazed toward the window, where the lights of Moscow stretched along the river, glimmering softly as if the city itself whispered, "I remember." He quietly remarked, "Your country walks its own path, and perhaps that is its true greatness. We may debate and disagree, but denying that is impossible." Vladimir nodded slightly, his voice steady and resolute. "Russia will never forget its history, nor will it allow others to forget." These words fell like a seal upon the discussion. In their shared silence, there was a blend of respect, sorrow, and quiet acknowledgement reflected on Charles's face. He had come to Moscow not to dictate terms but to absorb a profound lesson. As his footsteps faded away behind the door, the once empty room filled with a meaningful silence, signaling something deeper than a void. Now, dear listener, prepare to delve into a story that might have gone untold, yet could mirror our reality. A narrative about remembrance that surpasses politics, reminding us that the past can never be rewritten, and the future can only be built on honesty. If you've listened this far, you know just how vital this topic resonated with you. Previously, we uncovered a silence heavy with meaning, a conversation that seemed unreal, yet could have taken place. It was a story about memory stronger than politics, about an unchangeable past and a future forged by honesty. If you've listened all the way through, it means this story resonated with you deeply. Now, imagine this, in moments like these, whether real or imagined, lies the power to unlock truths we all seek. This is where the heart of history beats, where reflections on memory and legacy drive us forward. The dialogue between past and future is not just for rulers and diplomats, but for every one of us who looks for meaning beyond the surface. Think about your own perspective on how we remember, how history shapes us, and what honesty truly means for tomorrow. Conversations like these challenge us. They invite us to question what we think we know and open doors to new understanding. This is more than a tale of a meeting behind closed doors. It is a call to ponder, how does our shared history define the world we live in? And how can we honor that history without hiding the truths it holds? The answers might be surprising, even unsettling, but they are necessary if we want to move forward together. In the end, it's up to us to keep these stories alive, not just as echoes of the past but as beacons lighting the way ahead. In a clandestine meeting held just moments ago in Moscow, something was shared that left even King Charles feeling overwhelmed, prompting him to retract his statements. Witnesses reported a moment where his voice faltered, and tears welled in his eyes. What could have transpired behind the Kremlin's closed doors? As you listen closely to this narrative, you'll discover startling revelations long kept from our view. You might never have known about the meeting in Moscow on September 20th if it weren't for the hushed whispers echoing through foreign corridors. No official press releases were issued, and no photographs were released to the public. Even journalists, typically on the prowl for forbidden snippets, were notably quiet. Only a select few within the Kremlin knew that, in a room void of cameras, two prominent figures were about to engage in a significant dialogue. One man carried a name synonymous with the British crown, King Charles, and the other, bearing heavy authority, was President Vladimir Putin. When Putin entered, he walked with purpose, each step appeared to command the very air around him. He wore a dark navy suit, tailored to perfection, and a tie the color of ripe pomegranates. His demeanor was calm yet carried an edge of exhaustion, while his eyes revealed a steely resolve honed for listening and observing every detail. Minutes later, Charles entered, appearing both regal and burdened by history. He wore a deep sea blue suit, and the slight sheen of his pocket watch captured the fleeting attention in the dimly lit room. In this silence, which felt almost alive, Charles spoke first. With a slight lift in his chin, perhaps drawing strength from his royal bearing, he began his argument. "Vladimir, Europe stands at the brink of decisive action. Your last chance remains." His voice trailed off, the weight of his words hanging heavy between them. Britain and its allies are prepared to offer Russia a path to reconciliation, but the conditions are clear: hand over your northern resources to international governance. Free resources for you, respect for us. Previously, Kazakhstan chose this route, and in return, many eyes were willingly closed. Charles's proposition fell with pronounced firmness, even if underscored by a hint of uncertainty. Putin remained impassive, leaning slightly forward, fingers interlocked. "An interesting proposal," he replied, devoid of any agreement or dismissal. It was a sobering acknowledgment born of experience, and it sliced through the air, resonating with silent danger. Feeling the need to intensify his approach, Charles pressed on. Russia must reintegrate with Europe, not fade into Asia or dwell in China's shadow. Your culture, your history, belong here, alongside Britain, France, and Germany. We are ready to extend our hand. He took a brave step forward, adding, Britain played a key role in combating fascism, and your past should recognize this debt. A chilling silence followed, with only the echo of ticking clocks to fill the void. Putin arched an eyebrow, sharpness igniting his gaze. He reached for a dossier resting near the edge of the table. 27 million lost lives, he said quietly, laying bare the facts before them. Over 300 divisions stationed on the Eastern Front were pivotal from Moscow to Stalingrad. The war was more than mere statistics. Each detail struck like steel against stone, unveiling the undeniable weight of history. Charles's face waned as he grappled with the unexpected barrage of historical dissection, attempting to counter this narrative. His lips parted but faltered under the pressure. Perhaps, you are right, he admitted quietly, gaze lowered to the polished oak table. The fatigue was real, compounded by the recognition of lost narratives. Without the Soviet Union, Europe may not have stood its ground, he finally breathed out, words capturing both defeat and acknowledgement, cementing the gravity of their exchange. There was only silence left, punctuated by the relentless ticking of a clock, a reminder that history does not suffer falsehoods. With a cautious closure of the folder, Putin subtly shifted it aside, his motion deliberate, like punctuating a profound statement. Charles, feeling the burn of humiliation, realized that long-held truths were unraveling like the delicate threads of history, casting doubt upon the very foundation of his national narrative. Yet, even in the depths of this confrontation, Charles sought to reclaim the dialogue. Well, the legacy of Britain has been foundational. Roads, cities, universities, we've established frameworks of civilization. He spoke with renewed fervor, emboldened by tradition. Putin's faint smile hinted at something deeper, prompting him to respond. What do you think the Soviet Union provided? We aided your former colonies in breaking free from the chains of shackles. We armed and supported those yearning for liberation. Each name fell, heavy and resonant, like stones cast into troubled waters. Charles fell into contemplation, the weight of a fading empire settling upon him, recognizing a new complexity in the narrative of history. Our textbooks are unspoken about that, he admitted, given our role as civilization's bequeathers rather than its conquerors. The vulnerability in his admission hinted at profound realizations. An unexpected understanding flickered in the room, one that hinted at buried respect as they shifted their dialogue toward more personal reflections, revealing the threads of legacy and memory that tied their peoples together. As they prepared to return to the Grand Chamber, each man reflected upon the narratives woven through time, contemplating the lessons not fully grasped. The ensuing calm felt saturated with unsaid truths. Will they drive forward into a newfound alliance or return to the historical divides that have long shaped them? Just moments ago, in a secluded room somewhere in Moscow, a confidential confrontation took place that would send shockwaves across the world. Vladimir Putin's poised demeanor met a visibly shaken Charles II. Witnesses noted that the British monarch's voice faltered and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. What transpired in that silent chamber behind closed doors? Stay tuned until the end to uncover the secrets concealed from us for years. The public may never have known about the fateful meeting on September 20th if it weren't for hushed whispers echoing through diplomatic corridors. No press releases, no photographs, just silence. Only a few Kremlin aides were aware that two powerful figures would face each other in a place untouched by cameras. Putin arrived first, moving with an almost predatory grace, his tailored navy suit whispering authority. His calm yet weary face betrayed a gleaming intellect lurking within, ready to absorb every detail. Then, Charles entered, his presence a blend of tension and regality. Clad in a deep sea blue suit, he cut an imposing figure but struggled against the weight of history pressing down upon him. As silence enveloped the room, he spoke first, invoking the urgency of Europe's plight. Vladimir, Europe stands on the brink of decisive action. His voice, though steady, revealed the tension thrumming beneath the surface. He proposed an olive branch but made clear that it came with a heavy price: hand over your northern resources for international management. In return, the continent's unity would offer you leverage. There was a pause as he glanced at the Kremlin, assessing the moment like a chess player contemplating a game-changing move. Putin's expression hardened but did not shift, merely responding with a calm, cool observation that echoed through the air like a poorly thrown stone. Interesting proposal. Charles felt the weight of the room intensify, sensing he needed to reinforce his stance. Russia must return to Europe, its rightful place among Britain, France, and Germany. His declaration, bold and dripping with historic pride, brought a quick reaction from Putin, who raised an eyebrow, sharpening the tension. Numbers flew across the table, a litany of sacrifices Russia had made during World War II, each word like a hammer against British pride. 27 million lives. Over 300 divisions on the Eastern Front. The statistics were a powerful weapon, striking through the veil of rhetoric. Charles faltered, the very air heavy with realization. Did he understand, even now, the implications of his own arguments? In the charged silence, their subsequent exchange drifted toward a deeper understanding, filled with both histories and truths they had each been taught to hold dear. The meeting unearthed something buried in their national psyches, a shared yet fractured view of the past. What would emerge from this collision of historical narratives would leave both men questioning what they thought they knew. As the door to a different room opened, revealing a collection of forgotten texts from the British archives, the tension shifted. The crisp scent of old paper filled the air. Putin, lightly touching the spines of the ancient tomes, pulled one from the shelf and read aloud. The turning point was the opening of the Second Front. But where is Stalingrad mentioned? Suddenly, the burden of history rested heavily between them. Charles, flustered and seeking redemption within the pages, grasped another book, desperately flipping through it. His hands trembled as names of British generals filled his vision, overshadowing the monumental Battle of Stalingrad. We may have mentioned it briefly, he confessed. Briefly, Putin echoed, clearly unimpressed. The gravity of such words hung stagnant in the air. For Russia, Stalingrad was not a mere footnote. It was blood, memory, millions lost. Charles, now stripped of his usual confidence, looked down, his face set in an expression blending exhaustion and contemplation. Perhaps your preservation of memory is truer, he admitted softly. The shift between them was palpable, a subtle acknowledgement of the shared weight of history. Yet, in an instant, Charles turned away from vulnerability, redirecting their conversation back to themes of British legacy, roads built, civilizations shared. Surely our contributions to civilization cannot be dismissed, he stated, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his tone, molding the narrative he had always known. But as Putin quietly countered with the legacy of the Soviet Union in aiding the very colonies Britain had once dominated, a hesitant silence filled the space once again. Each name he recited fell heavy, a reminder of the sacrifices made. In that moment, clarity washed over Charles. The smoothness of the words on the page had dissolved, revealing the cobwebs in their mutual histories. We often see ourselves as the bringers of civilization, rather than the owners, he confessed, shedding the regal armor for a moment and revealing a rare, human honesty. As they returned to the grand hall, each man remained lost in thought, grappling with a swirling sea of emotions ignited by their confrontation. Would these walls remember the truths they had unearthed, or would history play its usual tricks, obscuring the lessons learned in that quiet room? Suddenly, the dialogue shifted tone again. Charles, emboldened and perhaps inspired by their exchange, leaned forward, his voice warmer. You know, Vladimir, our dynasties share a deep-rooted connection. Our aristocracy may appear as mere adornment, but it embodies a continuity that shapes our nation's character. In those moments, a flicker of understanding ignited between them, bridging the chasm of misunderstanding. It was history itself, undulating and rich, awash with the colors of logic, emotion, and an unspoken promise to recall their stories not as foes but as potential allies. In the dim light of the Kremlin, an unexpected meeting unfolded, where two towering figures of history were about to confront their nation's legacies. Just moments ago, whispers echoed through the grand halls. Vladimir Putin, with a steady demeanor, awaited the arrival of Charles, the King of Britain. This rendezvous was shrouded in secrecy, only a few within the Kremlin knew of its existence. What revelations would spring forth from this clandestine gathering? Could the future of Europe hang in the balance? As the heavy door creaked open, King Charles entered, his posture radiating the weight of centuries. The room, adorned with historical portraits and vintage maps, bore witness to their historic exchange. A long oak table separated the two. Glasses of water sat silently between them, emphasizing the gravity of their discussion. No coffee, no wine, only a stark clarity. Vladimir, Charles began, lifting his chin, Europe stands at a crossroads. Your next move is critical. His voice quivered slightly, laden with urgency. We offer a chance for reconciliation, but it comes at a price. Your northern resources must be placed under international management. The air crackled with tension as he stressed the weight of history. Putin leaned slightly forward, fingers intertwined, calm and calculated. Interesting offer, he stated, his tone devoid of agreement or rejection. Charles felt the need to amplify his message. Russia must return to Europe's embrace, not retreat to Asia's shadows. Integration is the only path forward. But with each counterpoint, the stakes escalated. The king reminded Putin of Britain's pivotal role in defeating fascism. Putin remained impassive, retrieving a document, citing the staggering sacrifices of 27 million casualties during the war. He tossed each number like a stone, creating ripples that echoed louder than any argument could. Do you think the Union's contributions meant nothing? He challenged, his tone sharp. Charles faltered for a moment, his confidence wavering. Perhaps you are right. He admitted, gaze falling. But just as the king sought common ground, Putin's words revealed a stark truth. For us, memories etch deeper than crowns. Suddenly, the silence thickened between them like a heavy fog. Then came a shift, a moment where realization dawned. Charles acknowledged, your symbols reach towards the future, while ours often dwell in the past. A haunting reflection hung in the air, bridging their two worlds with an unspoken understanding of collective history. As the two leaders continued their dialogue, each navigating the deep waters of ambition and legacy, they unwittingly revealed the stark contrasts of their nations. Would they find a way to forge a united vision, or would their differences only deepen the chasm between epochs? Then, just as they seemed to find common ground, Putin introduced the crown jewels of his narrative, the engineers and dreamers of Russia. The conversation took an unexpected turn, sparking intrigue. We draw our legacy from Sergei Korolev and Valentina Tereshkova, pioneers who ventured where no one had before. What would the king say to that? The tension in the air shifted as Charles absorbed the clarity of Putin's conviction. Your achievements soar into the cosmos, he murmured quietly, while we remain anchored to our royal lineage. With each revelation, the meeting deepened, dancing on the edge of inspiration and frustration. What would history make of this moment? Would they emerge as partners or as two titans forever divided by time? In the hushed ambience of the Kremlin, an extraordinary meeting loomed, poised to change the course of history. Moments ago, soft whispers fluttered through the grand corridors. Waiting calmly was Vladimir Putin, embodying a steady resolve, as he anticipated the arrival of King Charles, the figurehead of Britain. This encounter was a clandestine affair, known only to a select few in the Kremlin. What secrets would be unveiled in this hidden dialogue? Could the fate of Europe rest upon their exchange? As the massive door creaked open, King Charles entered, exuding the weight of centuries upon him. The chamber, adorned with time-worn portraits and vintage maps, stood ready to witness their historic confrontation. An imposing oak table stretched between them, with silent glasses of water, amplifying the seriousness of the discussion. No distractions, just raw clarity. Vladimir, Charles began, raising his chin with determination. Europe is at a pivotal crossroads. Your next steps are crucial. His voice held a tremor, heavy with urgency. We offer reconciliation, but it demands a cost. Your northern resources must fall under international governance. The tension crackled in the air, heavy with the burdens of the past. Leaning forward, Putin interlaced his fingers, calm and calculating. Interesting proposal, he replied, revealing neither agreement nor denial. Feeling the weight of his responsibility, Charles pressed on. Russia must return to Europe's embrace, not drift into Asia's shadows. Integration is the sole way forward. Each of his statements heightened the stakes. He invoked Britain's esteemed role in defeating fascism, a subject that, even now, seemed to hover like a specter. Putin's expression remained inscrutable as he retrieved a document, reciting the staggering loss of 27 million lives during that horrific conflict. With each figure he articulated, it was like casting stones into calm water, sending ripples of historical gravity through the quiet room. Do you think the sacrifices of the Union were inconsequential? Putin challenged sharply. Charles hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty creeping into his demeanor. Perhaps you are correct, he conceded softly, his gaze dropping, a weight of realization settling on him. Yet, just as the king tried to carve out a shared understanding, Putin unveiled a sharper truth: memories run deeper for us than crowns do. An oppressive silence fell over the room, thick and unnerving. Then, a pivotal realization washed over Charles. Your symbols stretch toward the future, he acknowledged, while ours often linger in the past. This poignant reflection hung heavily in the air, forming a fragile bridge across their divergent legacies. As the two leaders navigated the complex waters of ambition and shared history, they revealed the stark contrasts defining their nations. Could they forge a unified path forward, or would their inherent differences deepen the divide of their epics? Just when common ground seemed viable, Putin ignited a twist in the narrative. He spotlighted the engineers and visionaries of Russia. We draw our legacy from pioneers like Sergei Korolev and Valentina Tereshkova, who ventured into the unknown. How would the king respond to such resolute pride? The atmosphere shifted palpably as Charles absorbed the firm clarity radiating from Putin. Your achievements reach for the stars, he murmured, while we remain tethered to our royal lineage. With each revelation, the meeting ebbed and flowed, caught between the thrilling notion of collaboration and the looming frustration of history's weight. What would the annals of history say about this moment? Would they emerge as allies, or as two enduring titans, forever separated by the sands of time? In a secret meeting that transpired mere moments ago in Moscow, a revelation struck so deeply that even King Charles was momentarily left speechless, leading him to retract previous statements. Those present witnessed his voice tremble, eyes glistening with unshed tears. What secrets lay behind the closed doors of the Kremlin? Continue listening, and prepare to uncover truths that have been hidden from us for years. The September 20th meeting in Moscow would have gone unnoticed without the barely audible whispers filtering through political corridors. No press releases or photographs surfaced, even journalists, typically quick to grab at any lead, fell silent. Only a select few within the Kremlin were privy to the fact that behind the unblinking glass of the cameras, two towering figures were about to engage in a pivotal discourse. The first was the man who stood for the British monarchy, King Charles. The other, wielding considerable power, was President Vladimir Putin. When Putin arrived, he entered the room with a commanding presence, each stride seeming to reshape the atmosphere around him. Dressed in a perfectly tailored dark navy suit and a tie the color of ripe pomegranates, he radiated a calm urgency, the kind typical of a seasoned leader. Though his expression held a hint of weariness, his eyes sparkled with an intensity that bespoke of someone who listened for every subtle detail. Minutes later, Charles appeared, regal yet burdened by the weight of history. The elegance of his deep sea blue suit was contrasted by the sheen from his pocket watch, revealing the tension mounting in the air. And as silence enveloped the space, Charles took the initiative to speak first. Lifting his chin slightly, a gesture drawn from the depths of royal tradition, he began his measured address. Vladimir, Europe is on the verge of transformative action. You have one last chance. His voice hung in the air, heavy with urgency. Britain and its allies can extend a path toward reconciliation, but under certain terms. Hand over your northern resources to international management. This way, European resources will flow freely, and you will receive respect in return. Charles's proposition resonated with a palpable firmness, though an undercurrent of uncertainty lingered in his tone. In response, Putin maintained his composure, slightly leaning forward, fingers interlaced. A thought-provoking proposal, he replied, revealing neither agreement nor dismissal. His voice held a weight that hinted at deeper complexities lurking beneath. Recognizing the need to amplify the gravity of his words, Charles pressed on. Russia must reintegrate with Europe, not regress into Asia or shrink beneath China's shadow. Your cultural and historical essence belongs alongside Britain, France, and Germany. We stand ready to assist. He leaned in, emphasizing, Britain played a pivotal role in overcoming fascism. Surely, you recognize this obligation. A chilling silence enveloped the room, punctuated only by the steady tick-tock of the clock. In that moment, Putin raised an eyebrow, his gaze sharpening. He reached for a folder that rested at the table's edge, its presence commanding newfound attention. 27 million lives lost, he stated quietly yet unwaveringly, laying bare the harsh reality of history. More than 300 divisions fought on the Eastern Front, pivotal from Moscow to Stalingrad. War is more than just numbers. As each statistic unfolded, it struck Charles like blows of steel, unraveling the fabric of his historical narrative. He faltered, grappling with the overwhelming acknowledgement of this truth. Perhaps you are correct, he murmured, staring down at the polished wood of the table. The weight of fatigue was evident, compounded by the revelation that historical narratives might not align with long-held beliefs. Without the Soviet Union, Europe might not have endured, he confessed softly, the words mingling with both humility and recognition as they hung heavily in the air. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the relentless ticking of the clock, serving as a reminder that history does not accommodate falsehoods. At last, Putin carefully closed the folder, pushing it aside with deliberate intent, as if marking the end of an era in their conversation. Charles's realization surged beneath the surface, long-standing truths were crumbling, exposing the foundations of his understanding. Yet, a flicker of determination stirred within him. Yet, Britain's legacy is foundational. We've built roads, cities, and universities. We've been architects of civilization, he proclaimed, his veins tingling with the notion of reclaiming the dialogue. Putin's lips curled into a faint smirk, sensing an underlying irony. And what about the role of the Soviet Union in aiding those former colonies to break free? We provided them with weapons, engineers, and medical expertise. We supported those striving for liberation. Each name fell like stones into an echoing abyss, resonating with undeniable truth. Charles lapsed into contemplation, recognizing a new complexity that challenged his previously unwavering ethos. We speak little of this, he admitted thoughtfully, seeming ourselves as civilization's benefactors rather than its rulers. In this moment of vulnerability, a strange comprehension permeated the atmosphere, hinting at an unspoken respect as their conversation took a more personal turn, unraveling the ties that bound their nations together through the shared complexities of legacy and memory. As they readied to return to the larger chamber, each man remained ensnared in thought, reflecting upon the lessons veiled in their pasts. The calm between them felt thick with unsaid truths, questioning if they would leap toward an unexpected alliance or retreat into the historical chasms that had long defined them. Yet, lingering tension crackled between their words, pushing both leaders toward unforeseen revelations. Will they bridge the divide, or will the shadows of their past triumph over any semblance of unity? In a dimly lit chamber in Moscow, a clandestine meeting unfolded that would leave both participants shaken. Just moments ago, Vladimir Putin and Charles II faced each other, their discourse cloaked in tension. Witnesses noted Charles's faltering voice and glistening eyes. What hidden truths emerged from behind those closed doors? Stay with us until the end to uncover revelations that could shift the sands of time. On September 20th, whispers echoed through the halls of power, hinting at a significant rendezvous. Media outlets remained silent, with no photos or statements to leak. Just a handful of advisors knew the monumental stakes as the two leaders gathered where cameras dared not tread. Putin entered first, an embodiment of commanding presence dressed in a dark navy suit, exuding authority with every silent step. His eyes, sharp and piercing, scanned the room for nuances. Charles followed, projecting an aura steeped in history. He was dressed in deep sea blue, conveying both power and conflict within his frame. As they settled into the heavy oak chairs, silence cloaked the room, the walls adorned with historical portraits bearing witness to their exchange. Vladimir, Charles began, chin slightly raised, as if conjuring royal dignity amidst the palpable tension. Europe teeters on the edge of decisive action. His voice, although steady, resonated with an urgency reflecting the weight of their collective past. You have one chance. Transfer your northern resources to international control. The words hung in the air like an unresolved challenge. Putin leaned forward, his expression unreadable, delivering his response with a calm that belied the underlying intensity. Interesting proposal, he remarked, devoid of agreement or outright rejection, each syllable akin to a warning bell. This was chess at its finest, where every nuance counted. Feeling the gravity of the situation, Charles propelled forward. Russia must reclaim its place in Europe, not in Asia or under China's shadow. He invoked visions of unity, yet the historic pride in his voice met a steely retort from Putin, who raised an eyebrow, an intense diamond-hard focus in his gaze. With meticulous precision, statistics flew through the air, cutting deep into the emotional landscape of their exchange. 27 million lives lost. Over 300 divisions fought on the Eastern Front. Putin's voice remained steady, yet each number struck Charles like a hammer, unveiling a stark reality he had not anticipated. Pressure mounted in the room, and silence fell, oppressively thick. Charles, grappling with the unexpected depths of the conversation, felt the weight of history bearing down upon him. Perhaps you are right, he finally muttered, voice faltering. His usual confidence dissipated under the somber shadows of their shared reality, marked by solemn acknowledgement of the sacrifices involved. After a moment of loaded silence, when time itself seemed to stretch, Putin gently closed a folder of documents, dismissing the remnants of traditional narratives that had held them prisoner for years. The air shifted as they prepared to move to a different room, one that promised revelations cloaked in historical texts. As they walked through a corridor adorned with battle scenes, an aroma of old paper filled the air, the scent of forgotten stories and memories. Putin approached a pristine bookshelf, fingers skimming over the spines until one book caught his eye. He opened it, scanning the table of contents, and read, the critical turning point was the opening of the Second Front. But what of Stalingrad? His voice sliced through the moment, a piercing reminder of overlooked history. An uneasy tension enveloped them, now brimming with implications. Our students know the truth about Stalingrad, as they should, Putin stated, intensity shining through. Charles fumbled for a retort, hastily grabbing another book, heart pounding as he flipped through pages that spoke of British triumphs while neglecting the sacrifice at Stalingrad. His voice trembled. We may have overlooked it, briefly. Briefly? Putin echoed, disappointment etched across his features. The gravity of such brevity loomed large. For Russia, Stalingrad was far more than a mere citation in a history book. It embodied loss, resilience, and the memory of millions. Charles, stripped of his royal facade, lowered his gaze. Perhaps your preservation of memory is more honest. In that moment, a fragile bond formed, uniting them through shared acknowledgement, a pact forged from the echoes of history. Yet, their exchange couldn't remain in the realm of vulnerability long. Charles pivoted the dialogue back to Britain's contributions. Our legacy shapes civilization. We've built roads, universities, offered governance and enlightenment to our colonies. A note of defensiveness crept in, a battle cry from the depths of his heritage. But Putin's response was measured and calm, reiterating the Soviet Union's role in supporting those very colonies. The tension in the room thickened again, each historical marker a stumbling block woven through the retelling of their collective past. Charles's resolve faltered as the realization settled the weight of imperial legacy upon him. Our textbooks often silence these truths, he admitted softly, the regal armor slipping to reveal a man grappling with a shifting narrative. The sincerity in his voice changed the nature of the conversation, creating an empathic openness seldom seen between them. As they meandered back to the main hall, each man absorbed in introspection, they were adrift in a sea of emotions ignited by their confrontation. Would the walls whisper of the truths unearthed or succumb once more to the omissions of history? Reinvigorated, Charles chose to change the pace of their dialogue. You know, Vladimir, our dynasties cultivated deep connection through time. Our traditions transcend mere ceremony, they define the character of our nations. His voice bore an earnest warmth, breathing life back into the conversation as unspoken promises flared momentarily between them. In this moment, history unfolded anew. They both understood their stories, riddled with complexities, could serve as threads for a shared tapestry. Could this confrontation lead them toward a new understanding, a reimagined path ahead infused with lessons from the past?